A beautiful blonde Nazi taught my girlfriend how to French kiss. And let me tell you, my girlfriend's a hell of a French kisser. This beautiful blonde Nazi also happened to be a woman, and she and my girlfriend have also never actually kissed. To explain, my girlfriend merely watched this Aryan princess lay a big wet one on Dr. Indiana Jones and took a few notes when she was a little girl. This blonde Nazi who taught my girlfriend the invaluable little trick of ending a good French kiss with just a bit of sucking on the lower lip. This Nazi was one of the bad guys from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. She was also severely foxy. But this piece isn't about the Last Crusade or foxy Nazis. It's not even really about my girlfriend. It's about something that happened to me a long time ago before I even met her. I suppose in its own way, it's about my first crusade. My first crusade to have sex with a complete stranger. This piece is about my first one-night stand. And I think crusade is perfectly justified here. If you look at the word, one of the definitions is a religiously motivated effort. That pretty much perfectly articulates my desperation to get laid on that particular night in Tucson, Arizona about 5 years ago. Little did I know that what transpired that night between that complete stranger and myself would soon take on a life of its own. No one got knocked up. I think. Yeah, exactly. This incident, this triumph, and this tragedy would come to be known as the Dixie Cup story. It was up until that moment at once my finest hour sexually as well as my worst. I've told this story many times, but I've never until now written it down. You're welcome. I was 27 years old and at the time, and sure, I've had sex with people who I barely knew or I met once before. I could even be considered by some snifter sippers as something of a slut, and I'm fine with that assessment. I was proudly promiscuous, but yes, perhaps at times, maybe not as discerning as I would like it to be. But that all being said, up until that point, I have never had what I consider a true one-night stand. At 27, I was single and I was meeting different women and having a good time enjoying not knowing where any given night would take me. But I should stop briefly and clarify that although I referred to my seeking of a one-night stand as a crusade, it wasn't some long-term crusade to have a short-term relationship. It only became a crusade for me on that particular night in Tucson about 5 years ago. What brought me to that night, to that bar, to me drinking by myself on a Saturday night was breaking up with my girlfriend in the last 5 months. What's crazy to me now was how down I was about the whole thing, even though I was the one to break us up. I think it's just because I had really loved her, but I knew it wasn't going to work out between us. I left because I could tell that she was already beginning to pull away from me, and I was already afraid of being rejected by her, so I pulled the trigger first. So there it was, just a guy at a bar by himself, having a few too many drinks and feeling sorry for himself. Not exactly the perfect recipe for attracting the sexual advances of lady bar patrons. But the thing is, I'm pretty good at hanging on a grin and putting on a show for people. I spent some of the worst days of my life clocking in and going to work and just carrying on like nothing happened. Days when I found out someone I loved was dying of a terminal disease, or even on the day they actually died, I spent those times cracking jokes and with friends or coworkers. I spent them going in for my shift, smiling at customers and telling them thank you, come again. I spent these days not telling anyone, even my closest friends, what was going on. Because what was the point? How was that going to help? I've been told my whole life that how opening up and sharing can really help you feel better and less alone, and I've rarely seen this actually applied and demonstrated effectively. Usually telling anyone else about my problems makes me feel even more isolated and miserable. You ever had that thing where you're trying to tell someone about something really important, something deep down in your guts, one of the big fucked up scars on your brain that you've never shared with anybody else before, but now that you feel close enough to this person, you think that they're the right one to finally display it to? So now at last, someone can get to know you, really sincerely and deeply know the tortured and fractured and mutilated thing that you really are. You ever had that thing when you reach out and before you even halfway through explain what it is that truly fucked you up, you look into the other person's eyes and realize they cannot be more bored with you and your pain? How much does that suck when you find out that the worst things that you've ever suffered just bore the holy hell out of the people that are close to you? The answer, I think we all know, is a lot. So sharing does not help, at least for me, at least usually. That's probably a good reason why I write, in hopes I can doctor up and decorate my own sorrow enough that someone will want to read it, be entertained by it, and maybe secretly, at least to them, give a shit about how I felt about certain things pertaining to the human experience we're all going through. A dumb hope that I still think is kind of pathetically noble, that with the right combination of words I can make you know me. I can even make you enjoy getting to know me, even if you don't really enjoy me. So, back to my story. I'm feeling crummy at a bar in Tucson, but admirably hiding it behind being charming as all get out, like usual, and getting offered amazing but apparently terrible sex by a stranger, which is unusual. While sitting there, missing my recently axed girlfriend, I noticed a pair of eyes on me. They belonged to a woman with dark hair, a bit curly, and when she noticed my recognition, she flashed a smile. I smiled back. I'm nothing if not polite, and she took this as an invitation to pick up her drink and sit next to me. Immediately upon sitting there, she took the opportunity to whisper in my ear, "You're the best looking guy in here." Clearly, she had been drinking for some time. But I answered this with, "Don't worry, more will be coming soon." Or something like that. Whatever I did say, she laughed at it. So she ordered both of us another round. Up close, I noticed that she was maybe a bit older than me, maybe early 30s, maybe mid-30s, and she was definitely a bit bigger than the girls I've been with before. She wasn't massive by any means, but she was probably heavier than me, and so I didn't know if I could handle being on top of her. For some reason, that was a bother. The point is, to be fair to myself, I'm more than fairly shallow, and looks do count towards your overall grade, especially when I know nothing else about you and I'm looking for sex and not much else. So I was going to decline the drink she offered me politely and pay my tab, but she insisted. And I don't recall exactly what the context or even what the sentence was, but she used the word litany, and I've always loved the word litany. So I told her this, and we started talking. So yes, I am shallow, but there are depths to my shallowness. You give me a good conversation, you make me laugh, you tell me a good story, and you got my attention. But the thing that really sealed the deal on my end was that she told me her name. Her name was Tony. My name is Tony. Quick confession. Although my crusade to have a full-on one-night stand had only begun that night a few hours previous, I have had a casual, lifelong crusade, if there are those sorts of things, to have sex with someone who has the same name as me. Not every straight person has the opportunity to do that. Who would I be to squander that? I've always said if I could meet a girl with a mirror resting above her shoulders, I'd marry her. So with my same name, wouldn't that be some sort of consolation prize? Wrong. Very, very wrong. The name thing would really come back to bite me in the ass later that night. But back to the bar. I don't think we even ordered another round. Within an hour or so, she invited me back to her place, and I had accepted. For once, the universe had perfectly aligned itself with my own desires, and I got exactly what I wanted when I wanted it. She had a big truck of some sort, and I followed it with my old Volvo to her house. It wasn't that far from the bar at all, but I was getting the feeling that I should just turn my car around and head back home. But I counted it with the thought, go home to what? To an empty apartment and the internet, to whack off the porn, or just pour myself a glass of chocolate milk, brush my teeth, and go to bed? That big, oversized bed of mine that I used to love because it was so gigantic, but now it felt like a stretched out, endless empty sea. Fuck that. I wasn't going home. Not yet. So I parked the car, and I walked up, and I met her at the door, where she started kissing me, and she brought me inside. Right before we started having sex, she stopped abruptly and said she wanted to get something. At this moment in my head, I was like, oh God, don't let it be toys. I'm barely in the mood for sex. I'm definitely not in the mood for sex accompanied with kinky fuck devices. If I had known what she was actually planning, I would have begged and pleaded instead for some giant three-pronged black vibrator, or a starfish-shaped cock ring, or a pair of pony plugs. Any of this would have been much preferred. Instead, she comes waltzing back, brandishing a compact disc of Joan Osborne, which she proceeded to play on her DVD player. While this is happening, I'm hoping against hope that maybe she'll skip Joan Osborne's one actual hit and at least play me something bland and awful I haven't heard 4 billion times before. But sure enough, that familiar, somber to the point of portentous sound of What If God Was One of Us creeps into the room.
Oh, no.
And again, I'm wondering if I should just go home. Now it wasn't just a matter of, is this something I really want to do? Now it became a matter of, is this something I can actually do? I mean, physically. Could my dick actually stay hard and not turn to microwave butter while the song was playing? Unfortunately, the answer was yes. Yes, it could. Earlier, I mentioned my secret crusade to bed someone with my own name, and that it backfired me big time. Here's why. Tony, the other Tony, made it a point to call out our collective name, and to do so a lot. When I say a lot, I mean too goddamn much. Not only to the point that the novelty wore up, but to the point that I was beginning to think she was mocking me. Or us, as it were. Either way, I've never hated my own name so much. I think part of it was just the fact that someone who knew next to nothing about me was calling my name like it was some sort of heathen prayer. It didn't feel appropriate or earned, it just felt forced. But none of this is why the night was the peak and valley of my sexual history. None of this is why the story came to be known as the Dixie Cup story. Tony and I hadn't been at it too long when all of a sudden I felt like someone had flung a small Dixie cup full of liquid across my belly button. Not sure at first what to make of this. I didn't say anything. I just looked down and saw some liquid on my lower abdomen. And then it happened again. And it was warm, and it was sudden, and then I was really not sure what to make of it. I still hadn't said anything at this point, but the look on my face must have registered as a deep, concentrated, but quiet panic, because she made it a point to reassure me. She said, don't worry, I didn't pee on you. Well, that was a relief. I didn't say that back. What I did say was, oh, so what did you do? I'm just really horny, she said, and sometimes I squirt. Oh, I said, okay. It's important to note that this entire exchange happened while she continued to straddle and grind down on me. In fact, she barely even slowed down, and soon after she clarified what exactly her body was projecting onto my body, her body decided to expel yet another Dixie cup's worth of splash onto me. I had never experienced actual female ejaculation before leading up to this event. I'd seen some stuff in porn which seemed fake, and after this event, I am sure that much of what passes for female ejaculation or squirting in porn is indeed fake. What was happening with Tony here was very different than the cracked open fire hydrant in the middle of a hot Chicago summer day that's strewn with kids in swimsuits dancing in the geyser stuff that's in a lot of these porn movies. Sure, there's a lot of liquid coming out of her, but it was of a different consistency than that stuff. So she kept on going, and I laid back and I enjoyed it. And I admit it was very gratifying in that moment to have such an overwhelming physical evidence that she was enjoying herself, and that more importantly, she was enjoying me. After all, that's why I was there, right? We have sex for a lot of reasons, a litany even. Tonight was mostly about me trying to fill an ex-girlfriend-shaped hole in my chest with somebody completely different shaped block. Even if certain pieces fit, there was no way the whole thing was going to snap into place the way it should. But I am a dutiful lover, and we continued until she and I were both finished. I excused myself to the restroom directly after, and once the sting of the lights evaporated, I got a quick look at myself in the mirror. I was covered from just below my navel to my crotch and a bit of my inner thigh with a thin, gleaming film. When telling this story to my friends later, I'd like to exaggerate, and then obvious I'm exaggerating to be hyperbolic in order to tell this funny story away. I tell them that I look like Bill Murray in Ghostbusters after he meets Slimer for the first time. The truth is I wasn't quite as bad, but like Dr. Peter Venkman, I did feel funky. But it wasn't really because of the mess, because I have no problem getting messy with sex. It was that I looked in the mirror and I knew that this had been a mistake. Not that I need sex to be with someone I love every time, or even somebody I really care for, or even know to a certain degree. I don't. I'm not that complicated. Sometimes sex is just sex, which this was, but it was also sex for a blatantly stupid reason. I went home with somebody I wasn't really that into simply because I wanted to go home with somebody, anybody at that moment. Now that my mind was clear and I was terrifyingly sober, I knew that my little crusade had been nothing but a distraction from everything else I needed to face. But it gets worse. I got out of the bathroom and Tony had put on some bath towels over the bed, which I had noted when leaving to go to the bathroom had become less of a bed and more of an enormous dark wet stain. There wasn't much light in the room. It all came from her TV, which was playing that dance pattern crap that plays when you play a CD on your DVD player. And I can definitely see the stain still creeping around the edges of the towel draped over the bed. And yes, thankfully, that shitbird Joan Osborne CD had stopped playing at this point. Tony patted the bed and told me she wanted me to lay down next to her. Just for a little bit, she said, just a few minutes. I really didn't want to. But I also really didn't want to be completely honest and tell her how big of a mistake I just made. And I didn't really want to hurt her feelings. So I laid down next to her, and she spooned me, and it was terrible. Not that she was a poor spooner, I just felt like it was such a lot. On top of everything else, knowing that I did all this because I had missed the intimacy of my ex-girlfriend, this cheap Kroger brand knockoff, this imitation of intimacy was probably the saddest and worst part of the entire night. She told me I was welcome to sleep over, but I lied and said I had to work early. She gave me her number and a goodnight kiss. I had no use for either, but I accepted both with perfunctory grace, and then I left her and drove home. The next day I was shooting a little indie movie with a couple of friends of mine on a day off work and told them the story the first chance I got. I left out all the moping and self-loathing bits and focused instead on the squirting and my subsequent fleeing of her house after sobering up and realizing I had made a poor choice. Everybody laughed, and I did too. And I still do. Some of it is very funny. Some of it is very sad. And some of it changes back and forth from one to the other every time I tell the story. All my friends know this story. I've been asked to tell it to new people many a time, and I invite this. I enjoy this. Why else would I be telling it to you now? The Dixie Cup story, and now my sharing about the sharing of the story, my confession about how I made a joke about that night with this woman, and all my heartache, and all I want to be a cad, but still have a heart of gold, why I want someone to appreciate how perfectly fucked up I am bullshit, it's still all a regurgitation of the same thing. I can be a thoroughly unpleasant person. And why is that sometimes charming? Is this what all my stories are about? Maybe, but then again, maybe not. I do know this. I have nothing against this woman. I just have no desire to ever see her again. At least I didn't back then. She had shown me great kindness, or at least tried to. I guess I wasn't really in any position to accept it. I rarely am. Way back at the beginning of this, I said that I was on a crusade to have sex with a complete stranger. But sex is rarely just sex, and what I really was seeking was comfort. For someone to know me, in some degree, and to accept me. Because at that time in my life, on that night, that person who did know me, who knew me the most, did not want to anymore. They didn't want to comfort me anymore. Maybe that's because they got to know me too well. Maybe it has very little to do with me at all. Regardless, the result is the same. I do think I prefer the comfort of strangers at times because they are just that, strangers. If a stranger decides they no longer want to see you, what's the harm? What was the loss? Especially when the alternative seems to only be rejected by the person who knows you best and who used to give you comfort. At least that's how it seems when you're feeling sorry for yourself and drunk and horny and forgetting that you're the one who pulled the trigger on the breakup gun in the first place. This wasn't my last one-night stand. There have been a few more, and I enjoyed most of them a lot more because I went into them for better reasons. That being said, I don't think any of the ladies involved in these trysts have quite enjoyed themselves as much as Tony did that night. At least there wasn't as much evidence. I'm happier than I've ever been with my girlfriend now, and even though I enjoyed my single days very much, I'm more than pleased to say they're behind me for good. Because I feel I've outgrown it, and because I feel like I did a lot of exploring, and because I had a really good time doing it. But mostly because with my girlfriend now, everything feels better than any of the rest of the stuff would. She knows me better than anyone else, and I finally figured out to just go for it all the way, even if I fail, whether it's nobler, slings and arrows, and all that other happy horseshit. But I admit I do still seek the comfort of strangers, and I even do it right in front of my girlfriend. But she doesn't mind much. I'm talking about this right here. Everything I write, every story, essay, or article, or even novel, they all start out as one-night stands. Every page, every paragraph, every line, every word, they're all invitations. Fixed eyes and a flash of a grin, requests for comfort sent out into the dark. They might turn into something more, but then again they might not. In fact, I'll never know if you come back or not. That's the way this arrangement works. But of course, knowing that isn't very comforting. What's that?